Hey everyone, welcome to Ask Devan Anything and the Burn Bootcamp podcast. You are in the lab. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see us. If you're listening, what's up? How are you guys? I hope you're doing really, really well. This show is where I get to break down 3 questions each episode, and we come out with it every single Thursday. And my 3 questions for this episode are the following, all right? Number 1, this is from Katie Lee. She said, how do you and Morgan prep/plan your meals? All right, Katie, I'm going to dive into that. I cannot wait. Number 2 is from Carrie Shrimpf, and she asks, your thoughts on self-sabotage and why do we do it? Ooh, that's a deep one. That's an interesting one. All right, Carrie, we will get there. And number 3 is, what are amino acids and why are they important? All right, so a little science on today's show, Ask Devan Anything. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, and that will help Morgan and I know the impact we are making in the world, and we really appreciate it. All right, number 1, guys, let's go to Katie Lee and say, how do you and Morgan prep your meals? Okay, so meal prepping is made too complex, in my opinion, by the bodybuilding industry, and necessary for that sport and all of the intricacies in terms of the nutrition that comes along with that sport and being excellent and outstanding at it. You know, we don't necessarily need to follow those principles exactly. We can just pull down some things that really work for those people, okay? So you might see on side A, a professional bodybuilder might have 40 meals all laid out with a scale right next to a, pot of boiled chicken and, some steamed broccoli and some brown or white rice. And you might see them taking each individual Tupperware container 40 times over and kind of filling those up with equal proportion of chicken and broccoli and rice. And then you have 40 meals, all right, for the entire week. And that's exactly what you eat every single meal, all right? That's like the extreme bodybuilder way to do it. Now, what happens to most of us when, we get a little bit overambitious and we actually try to do that, here's what happens. We end up eating 10 of them, and then 30 of them end up being 7 or 8 days too old, and we mixed in, a Chipotle here, or we mixed in maybe a client or a business dinner here and there, maybe one day for breakfast, you wanted to eat with your kids, so you made some eggs and maybe some waffles, and all of a sudden, now you have like a bunch of meals left over, and then, we're wasting money, and we don't want to do that, and there's multiple downsides to that, okay? And so what Morgan and I started that way, and we taught Burn Bootcamp to start that way. And, if you go back to the early days at Instagram and you scroll through, what you're going to see is just counters full of empty Tupperware with my meals portioned out into them. And I'm glad that I did it that way. And maybe you would consider wanting to do that, for a minute, Katie, and maybe, try that and just see, how many of those meals you could consume. But it's not necessarily about that consumption. What happens most often is that just consumes your life. It consumes all of your extra time and your energy, putting forth all of that effort toward those meals that likely, if you're like 90% of us out there, likely not going to be consumed. All right, so let's take a few pages out of that and let's try side B. All right, so side B says, all right, so I have my protein, okay, that I make twice per week. I make it on a Sunday, and then I make it on like a Wednesday or a Thursday. And then what I also do is I could go one of 2 ways. You can get the, quick over the stove, steamed broccoli, and you kind of make that, and that doesn't take too long. What I like to do, all right, is I like to get the steamable, microwavable bags, and because listen, I'm not going to be one of these people that preaches to you to eat healthy, but then takes you out of practicality, right? So we need a range. Some of you out there, you have time to fire up that stove and to make sure that, you cook that broccoli in that pan every single meal. And by all means, please do that, right? It's just gonna be less convenient for you, and you're gonna really have to have that time. So if those of us that live life like I do, where I'm constantly going all the time, I need 10-minute meals or less. And that's what we started to come up with at Burn Bootcamp. And now we base all of our nutrition around this ideology of 10-minute meal prep, to where you cook your protein twice per week, and then you have you utilize the microwave, and you utilize very quick stovetop foods that you can prepare that maybe get you through 1 or 2 servings, okay? And that you can still use the Tupperware ideology to package up and store your food, but you're not doing it, 40 times over where it takes you 4 hours on a Sunday. You consume every single Sunday with making all these meals that you then don't even go eat. So it's like making what you need to make, right? And figuring out over time through trial and error. When you make protein twice a week, what are the other ways around making that protein that you can actually get to 10-minute meals? Because that's the goal, isn't it? Convenience. If you have the time, then spend the time, make the meals. There's no problem there. Most of us don't have the time. I think, Carrie, that's where you're really asking the question. So we need to prep our protein twice a week. Then you need to make steamable whenever possible. Okay. A lot of times what I'll do is instead of buying the minute white rice cups, right, because those do have like chemicals that can activate that rice in less than a minute to heat it, although I'm not necessarily always opposed to that if I'm in a pinch. What I like to do is take the minute rice, where literally the only ingredient in it is white rice, pour it into a bowl, all right, and then it takes about 3.5 minutes to cook it, and I'll still cook it in the microwave, either in like ceramic or glass. I tend not to use plastics whenever possible, just because of the overstated but possibility that the BPA from the plastic will leak into your food and contaminate the body. So that is my quick and dirty answer on meal prep, and you guys let me know if you want me to cover anything more uniquely or individually for you. I'd be happy to do that. Okay, that is important though. Okay, meal prepping is very important because energy is nutrition. Nutrition is energy, and nutrition is the foundation of our life. If we know how to meal prep and we equip ourselves with those tools on the tool belt, we're going to be able to navigate life with more energy. And when you navigate life with more energy, what happens is all of your interactions become better. The way you treat people becomes better. The way you interact with your family, especially the people that are close to you. We all know how our families can sometimes get irritating, even though they're the people that we love the most, right? And like, you're gonna have better interactions when that happens if you are properly nourished, if you're eating the appropriate amount of food and drinking the appropriate amount of water for the activity that you're doing. We don't want none of y'all hangry out here, okay? So no hangriness. There's some supplements that we have called Burn Nutrition for that as well. Afterburn bar, Afterburn protein. Listen, protein is the element where we get most sufficient, Carrie. So I want you to make sure that when you're focused on your food, that you don't just focus on calories, that you're also focused on one layer deeper, which is proteins, fats, and carbs, and proteins being the most important, right? I want to make sure that everyone gets at least 100 grams of protein in or more. And if you're not doing this, then you're definitely not maximizing your workouts. You're not maximizing your protein synthesis. And I think question 3 today was about amino acids. So I'll stop there and I'll pick back up at question 3. But Katie Lee, that was an amazing question. Meal prep / plan your meals is just practicality. How can we make things in 10 minutes or less? And it's not can we or can't we, it's how do we, not how don't we. So great question, I appreciate that. Let's go to number 2. Before we do that, make sure that you give that 5-star review, please. On Apple, we love seeing and reading your reviews and your comments. Carrie Shrimp, she asks, your thoughts on self-sabotage and why we do it. Ooh, this is a really juicy, deep question. Carrie, self-sabotage and why do we do it? So, I think self-sabotage is baked inside of the concept of point A to point B. See, what happens is I think we have this expectation that we set for ourselves to get from where we're at today to where we're going tomorrow. And we all know that that's not necessarily a linear path. I mean, raise your hand if you've ever set a goal and then you had something in the future and you wanted to get to that goal and everything along the way it happened exactly how you wanted it to happen. I think the answer is no one, and I don't think any of you are raising your hand. You always have this zig and this zag. And what I would say is that, Carrie, self-sabotage is really when you have an expectation to go to point A to point B, and you have these ideological milestones along the way, and you're envisioning everything around these milestones. And when it doesn't go that way, even though you're progressing, but even when it doesn't go that way, instead of getting from point A to point B in a straight line, you get there in a zigzag line, and you're bouncing off the walls, right? Because you're not sabotaging yourself to where you are and I hate to be manic, but this is where it can go, to suicide, right? And you're not also overjoy. So your walls aren't so wide to where you're going to let yourself go so far one way. And I'm assuming this, Carrie, this is for most people, although there are people with very, very, very extreme ends of the walls in which they're zigzagging in between. But those are like those walls that you zigzag between. Those are like your bumper rails if you were to go bowling. You go bowling and you could hit the gutter but it kind of bounces back and forth between gutter to gutter, and eventually you hit some pins, right? Well, that's kind of what goal setting is that you're setting your goals in a way in which point A to point B, the outcome, which is point B, and then you have these guardrails, and that's called core values, it's called your principles, it's called what you will and you won't tolerate. This question, I can't really unpack that. That would take us hours. But these guardrails are essentially the standards that you set for yourself. And from point A to point B, you're zigging and zagging, and you might even take a step backwards and slide down that hill, and there might be a swirl in the middle, on the way to get there. It's never linear. And what happens when we self-sabotage is that we get linear for too long. Okay, we make some really good progress, and then you're almost like, oh, I'm progressing too fast, right? I'm progressing too fast. I just did everything that I wanted to do in like a week. I thought I was going to do in 3 months in like a week. And so then you might self-sabotage, and you might hit the brakes and slow down a little bit. Okay, you could do that. That's like one way you could go wrong in self-sabotage. You're actually setting your goals too low is what that means. You're setting your goals too low, and so therefore you're hitting your goals. That's a misaligned expectation with how long you thought it was going to take you. Okay, I've done this in burn. Okay, let me give you a story. So before, in 2019, this company was like, we had like hockey stick growth. We had, nothing was stopping us. And then the pandemic hit. And obviously we had to close 275 gyms between like March 20th and like the end of March. So, we start going along the path of this explosive growth, and then boom, it gets halted, right? So we kind of have to zig, right? This is the first zig. So when we had never had to face adversity really before, so you get all the way up until this point, you're in this linear growth where, hey, we're going to the moon. We know our point B. We get this linear growth. We kind of hit this wall, all right? And instead of self-sabotaging and sliding backwards, right, and making short-term decisions that would interrupt the long-term point B, what we did is we manually zigged, and then we manually zagged, and we zig, and we zag, and we zig, and we zag, and 2 years later, we're in the same place as we were in 2019 from one perspective, but from another, like a revenue perspective and membership perspective, but from a different perspective, we are so much tighter operationally, for example, right? So how do you stop self-sabotage is when you hit that inevitable wall, when you are gaining linear progress and you're forced to zig, well, it's not being so tied to that point A, to that point B, that you forget that there's a multitude of different things that you could focus on. There's a multitude of different legs that are holding up the table to goal B that you just need to turn your attention and focus on those things. So the way you stop self-sabotage really is to be in the moment, to not make one thing everything. When you hit a plateau, throw your hands up and say, oh well, it's over from here, right? And then you give yourself permission to just slide down backward. No, you call an audible, you zig, okay? And you have to expect that the zig and the zag is going to happen, and your job is to just call the right zigs and the right zags at the right time and be able to navigate your way to that point B, knowing that it's never going to be the way that you thought it might be. So there's a level of foresight and anticipation to this that we have to have as human beings, and realize that you will, if you don't have a plan, inevitably self-sabotage if your goals are set far too low and you're reaching them far too fast. You're going to be like, wait a second. Wait, I'm not the person that should be reaching these goals this fast, so maybe let me tap these brakes a little bit and slow down. Don't do that, okay? Don't slow down, just set your goals higher. All right, Carrie. Wow, you guys got some good questions today. Okay, this is fun. We got one more today. That's what are amino acids and why are they important? This one comes from Samantha. What are amino acids and why are they important? Okay, so let me try to do this justice. You know what? I'm going to bring up an article too because I think this one will do a good job of telling you kind of the differences between essential and non-essential. So what are amino acids? Amino acids, first of all, are essential building blocks for protein synthesis. Protein synthesis is the way in which your body goes about building muscle. And what are the difference between essential and non-essential? I'm going to read from an article from Discover Magazine. So it said, amino acids are broken up into two categories, essential and non-essential amino acids. Essential amino acids, also known as indispensable amino acids, are those that must come from a person's diet because the human body lacks the metabolic pathway required to synthesize these particular amino acids. The amino acids that are not essential for the human body, known as the dispensable amino acids, can be synthesized by the body. In other words, the body is able to produce them without needing dietary help. So you need your essential amino acids, okay? And you need your non-essential amino acids. There's 20 basic essential and non-essential, and you need both of them, okay? But you can survive on just the ones that your body makes, okay? Now, what you need to really know, like practically, all right, there's a whole list of these. There's 21, I'm sorry, not 20. And there's a whole list of them, okay? And listen, I don't know everything about everything. That's not what Ask Devan is all about. And I'm not an expert on all 21 amino acids. But I do know that leucine is the most important amino acid when it comes to building muscle, because that's really, I hope what you're asking is, hey, why are these amino acid things important for me to build muscle? Well, they are the building blocks of protein synthesis, and you do need to understand that L-leucine, okay, or amino acid leucine, is a you need it in about 2.5 milligrams at about every meal. That's a good way to think about it, okay? And it comes from animal protein. It is found in plant protein, but in very, very, very low quantities, and is very potent in products like elk and bison, etc. So L-leucine, look out for that. So if you're looking at like an amino acid, like a branched chain amino acid supplement, all right, leucine is the one that I really want you to look for, okay? Although all of those branched chain amino acid supplements, they're gonna have everything that you need in them for the most part. But I think that's a good question because I want you guys to really understand your nutrition. Nutrition education is very important to me, and I'm kind of always learning as we go too. And I wanted to read one more part of this article that I thought would be really, really helpful for you, just so you can kind of know what essential amino acids are good for the human body. All right, so there's 21 overall, but 20 amino acids that the human body needs for proper growth and function. All right, and 9 of them are considered essential, that the body cannot produce them. Okay, that's very important. While the essential amino acids are important for muscle growth and repair, the non-essential amino acids playing a role in immune function and energy production. Non-essential amino acids can also be converted into glucose, which is used by the body for energy. So what's the difference between essential and non-essential amino acids? Essential amino acids are those that the body cannot produce on its own, and like we said, must be acquired through diet or supplements. And the non-essentials are not required by the body to function properly, but still do play an important overall role, okay? So and then it says, and this is the one I wanted you to really focus on here, adequate protein intake is necessary to get the correct amount of each essential amino acid. The recommended daily allowance, the RDA, for total protein, okay? And this is coming from, again, discovermagazine.com, okay? And this is without any other considerations, like if I never worked out ever, okay, is like 46 grams per day at the very, very, very minimum to maintain bodily function, and 56 grams per day in men. However, this is not like a science that's spread out over everybody, and there's so many considerations like how often you work and what your goals are and do you want to build muscle. We say, hey, no matter who you are, get 100 in, because everyone that's listening to us usually wants to build muscle and usually wants to work out. So there's a little introduction into amino acids. I think it's a good question because it's something important that you should know about, and it's kind of 3 layers deep. So it's like understand your calories, right? Understand your macronutrients, and then understand your macronutrients and how those things are made up. And then you'll start to really understand amino acids and protein and glucose and carbohydrates and fats. All right, sound good? Guys, that's Ask Devan Anything for today. 3 great questions. Thank you so much for checking us out on the podcast. And you can always drop your questions anywhere on the internet. We will get them. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, and we will talk to you very soon. See you next time. 2 claps on 2.